Hello, I'm Scott Brady with Overland Journal and Expedition Portal, and I'm out here in Prescott, Arizona with one of the most exciting new heavy-duty pickups to come onto the market in a very long time. We have been waiting for the GMC HD 2500 AT4x AEV. So this truck as an entire package represents what I believe to be the perfect confluence of comfort, capability, and capacity. So this vehicle has a 2,600 pound payload. We need to start with that. That's the challenge that we have with most of the vehicles on the market, is that they simply don't have the payload for the tasks that we demand of it. So you can not only have this filled with 5 passengers, but you can also have a 500 pound tongue weight, plus a couple motorcycles in the back, or you can install a Scout Kenai or another large camper into the back of this and load it up with all of the gear that you really need for backcountry travel. This truck also has a 36-gallon fuel tank, so it gives you that additional range. So now we have capacity at 2,600 pounds, we have range with 36 gallons, and as a diesel, you can easily increase that to 50 gallons or more with the aftermarket. Now, when we talk about capability, there's some really key features to this truck. Of course, it has the Duramax, which has 970 foot-pounds of torque. You have a low-range transfer case, 10-speed automatic with a very low first gear. So you have really good driver control on the dirt in low-speed technical terrain. You've also got ground clearance. This has over 11 inches of ground clearance with those 35-inch diameter tires. You have an 18-inch wheel with a 35-inch tire, so you actually have enough deformation and enough flotation if you air these tires down. You want to really avoid those 20-inch wheels at all costs. So 18s and 17s are really that sweet spot. This vehicle also finally gets rid of that G80 mechanical locker. You have front traction control, and then you've also got the AEV high clearance bumpers. So when we're looking at approach angle, departure angle, etc., you have really good angles because of these stamped steel AEV bumpers. This is a winch capable front bumper. It has these heavy duty nodular iron recovery points that are rated to more than gross vehicle weight. And when we talk about gross vehicle weight, this truck weighs 8,600 pounds. This is no joke, but it is ready to do serious overland travel. So driving this 2024 GMC HD AT4x AEV, there's a couple things that immediately come to mind. One of them is that I really like this drivetrain. It's on par with the Ford diesel. It's a 6.6 liter and it's their Duramax diesel, so it makes 470 horsepower and 975 foot-pounds of torque. So it's on par with all of the others in the market, and it's actually kind of nice that GMC isn't focusing purely on a number. They're focusing on how the engine performs. The process of switching the GMC into low range is easy. Neutral, there is a series of buttons just above the left knee, and you just push the 4 with the little down arrow, and that is going to put it into low range, and then you can go back into drive. You can also go into L and then manually control each one of the 10 speeds. So in L1, the crawl speed is very, very slow, particularly with the diesel engine. So good engine braking at low speed and really good overall control, and it allows for the effective use of left foot braking as well. So one of the big things about a heavy-duty pickup truck is that they can have an abusive ride quality. So the reason why people buy GMCs and Chevrolets is because of the independent front suspension, which already gives you a step order of improvement in ride quality given the amount of payload that they have. But then when you combine it with the fact that this truck has a 35-inch diameter tire and the Multimatic suspension, you end up with really good ride quality at low speed. You end up with better than the competition at moderate speed, and then you come back into really good ride quality at high speed when you're actually able to take full advantage of the Multimatic suspension system. You do notice that the front end goes over things much more smoothly than the rear does, because the rear is what's going to be taking most of the payload. This truck has a 2,600 pound payload. So each time that you feel like it's a little bit rough, remember that you have enough payload to actually go overlanding with, put a camper in the back, etc. All right, so we're coming up what is the largest obstacle that we have on our test track. And it typically requires like a 33-inch tire on a smaller vehicle, and then a 35-inch tire on a vehicle like a full size. And it really does a good job of climbing up on this ledge. Really effective left foot braking, which is something that I'm always looking for. The fact that you can engage the rear locking differential is also a key attribute of the vehicle, because now we no longer have that G80 rear limited slip locker, which I have never felt to be either appropriate for tread lightly or for terrain performance. So the rear locker is key, the 35-inch diameter tire is key, the 2 inches of additional ground clearance, 11 inches of ground clearance underneath the differential, all of that adds up to a very capable heavy-duty truck. So some observations now in the dirt. I've always liked diesels, and I do like this combination. It has so much power, but they also have done a good job with throttle mapping. So when you're in first gear, low range, throttle modulation is a little more difficult because there is so much power. So what I found is you can just go into second gear. So you go into L2, and a lot of times just in drive, it'll automatically default to L2. But a little bit of left foot braking helps to kind of attenuate some of that throttle responsiveness. But it gives a great deal of control. And the fact that you no longer have the G80 locker in the rear, which I've always felt it does not only does a poor job on tread lightly, but it also makes it very difficult for the vehicle to perform properly, because it requires wheel spin in order to lock. And that means that you can't have any kind of invasive front traction control to assist it. So now this vehicle has front traction control, and it also has a driver selectable rear locker. That's what we want. Driver selectable rear locker. That way when we're on extreme side slopes, if we're on snow, icy conditions, muddy tracks where we're trying to hold a line, we can turn off the rear locking differential, so that way we don't get understeer or oversteer from the vehicle, depending on if the locker is pushing the front or if it's sliding in the rear. So overall, I'm really happy with the off-road package. All of these trucks are a little bit rough in the rocks because of the spring rates, but the GMC is the best of the bunch. So if you're looking for improved ride quality, but still having a 2,600 pound payload, this is that sweet spot. A couple things I've noticed. I'd like to see a terrain mode in the option set for the drive modes, where it has a more aggressive intervention on the front traction control. It doesn't have to have one pedal drive. It can be an advantage for some people, but what I really want is for it to remap. Because one of the challenges with the off-road mode for GMC and Chevrolet is that it actually loosens the intervention of traction control. So you would use off-road if you were in the mud or if you were in the sand and you needed to have increased wheel speed. So you wanted less intervention, but in the rocks, you really want a terrain mode. I found that in just normal mode, the traction control actually works better than in off-road mode at low speed in the rocks. So engage the rear locker, and then you do get traction control intervention from the front end, which is very effective. The tires are great. A lot of traction from these tires and very low noise on the highway. So these new hybrid tires are a total win for overlanding, because most of the time you're not using this as a mud truck. Most of the time you're not using this as a rock truck. Most of the time you're not using it as just a highway truck. You're doing it for all things. So I think that the new hybrid tires are really the new Overland all-terrain, because they give you the broadest scope of performance out of a tire. So you really get to take advantage of the Multimatic suspension once the speed comes up a little bit. So once you get up to that 25, 30 miles an hour in the open desert, you might even be going a little bit faster depending upon allowable speed limits. But that's one of the challenges that HD trucks always have, is they push a lot in the corners. Those heavy solid front axles are not very responsive, and they don't provide a lot of turn in or a lot of nuanced control, whereas we're getting the advantage of that with independent suspension right now. All right, so we're looking at moderate speeds or higher speeds on the dirt. This vehicle does a lot better than most of the HDs on the market, and that's because it has an independent front end. So you end up with a lot less pushing through the corners. You don't have that really heavy and slow to respond solid front axle. You also don't have the effect of an impact on one tire unsettling the vehicle so much. I'm also not noticing a lot of step out from the vehicle. I'm seeing a little bit of axle wrap, which is normal considering 970 foot-pounds of torque. But overall, I'm not seeing a lot of pushing out of the vehicle despite the weight of that heavy diesel up front. So I'm seeing really good responsiveness, and a lot of that is going to be the combination of these Multimatic shocks and these great tires. These are really good tires. So overall, they're providing good traction. I'm feeling they're very predictable at higher speeds, even with a little bit of rotation out of the vehicle. So very direct on the steering, quite responsive, a much better higher speed package as an HD than anything else that's currently on the market. So one of the things with GMC that you've always got to talk about is comfort, because this truck is comfortable, and GMC is the world's only luxury truck brand. So you've got leather stitched dash, you've got leather seats with the AEV logo on them, which is something I'd be proud to have on the seat. And then you've got heated steering wheel, heated seat, multi-way power seat, leather center console, a big center console with a lot of storage. You've got a large screen. It's actually like a 16:9 format screen, so you have a lot of real estate to work with. I noticed that it's beneficial with the camera angles, but you've also got a very quiet interior. You get a little bit of that diesel noise, but it's more quiet than, for example, a Ram. And the seats are also very supportive and comfortable and not too soft. So they actually feel pretty good even on the trail. But the GMC really gives you that combination of comfort, capability, and capacity. So the diesel has 470 horsepower and 970 foot-pounds of torque. And you feel it, especially when combined with this 10-speed automatic. The 10-speed is one of the things that I fell in love with on the GMC AT4 half-ton that I had diesel. And this engine just keeps this diesel motor in the sweet spot all the time. Diesel engines have a smaller operating range on their RPM, at least most diesels do like this. So the fact that you have additional cogs in the transmission just keeps it right in that 970 foot-pounds of torque. And it accelerates strong from a light. It accelerates strong under passing. And it seems to be unfazed by the load or the amount of payload that you have either. And I'm also getting okay fuel economy. It's important to note that this truck weighs 8,600 pounds, and it does have 35-inch diameter tires. So I'm seeing about 14.5 miles per gallon under mixed driving conditions. I have heard of people getting closer to 18, 19 on the highway with a little bit lighter foot. But overall, this drivetrain, it's a dream, and it's fairly quiet and very responsive. So I would highly recommend the diesel, despite the fact that it adds some weight and adds quite a bit of cost to the purchase price. So let's go through pros and cons. We have to start with the pros. First of all, we have a diesel drivetrain, so 10-speed automatic, 970 foot-pounds of torque. You get a lot better fuel economy out of that 36-gallon tank. We also now have a very capable GMC HD, 35-inch diameter tires, rear locking differential, off-road mode, hill descent control, 11 inches of ground clearance. This vehicle is ready to actually go into the deeper into the backcountry. And then we also finally have payload combined with that level of capability. A lot of these highly capable half tons are really neutered when it comes to payload. But this truck has 2,600 pounds of payload and the ability to tow up to 18,000 pounds, which I don't know why you would do that, but maybe there's a situation where you need to tow that but not take it off-road, hopefully. But any large off-road trailer, this is going to tow it with ease. So even though the fact we really like this truck, it's always important to talk about the cons. On this particular vehicle, I've noticed that despite the fact the suspension works so well, it has very limited compression travel. So you have to be mindful of speed. This is not going to be a Raptor or TRX equivalent. So there is not a lot of compression travel. It's nearly on the jounces already, so you've got limited compression. So you notice that. And then there's also fairly limited extension travel too. So not a lot of travel range out of the front end, but at the speeds that an HD is meant for, it actually works quite well. Okay, the other thing that I think is important with these packages is that they become available in a wider range of cab configurations. I would really like to see the AT4x AEV in a regular cab long bed, or at least in like an extended cab configuration with an 8-foot bed. These 6.5-foot beds, they're really useful for a broad range of applications, but in a lot of situations for overlanding, we really don't need those back seats, but what we do need is more bed space, or we need the ability to fit a longer overall tray bed. So I'd love to see the package available like they just showed at SEMA in the AEV booth, where they had a regular cab with all the lockers, all the goodies, all the bumpers, all the cool stuff, and a tray bed, not a factory OEM tray bed necessarily, but the ability to get a regular cab 8-foot bed or an extended cab 8-foot bed, so that we have that additional bed space for campers, motorcycles, or tray beds. And the last thing that I would like to see is another driver selectable mode. So there is a normal mode, there is a towing mode, understandable for it being an HD, and then there's an off-road mode. It's important to note that the off-road mode is actually intended for higher speeds or intended higher wheel speeds. So that would be sand, mud, where you want to have less traction control intervention, you want to have less vehicle stability control intervention. I would like to see the terrain mode available on the HD, so it actually tightens up those traction control intervention criteria, so that you're less likely to have wheel spin out of the front end, to make up for some of that sensitive throttle that we're experiencing because of that 970 foot-pounds of torque and very low gearing. So a little bit of a change in the throttle mapping. All of that could be done within a terrain mode. Overall, this is an incredible vehicle. It's just amazing to think that in 2023, with a 2024 model, we can have all of this capability, all of this comfort, and all of this capacity finally in the overland market, and an impressive offering from AEV and GMC. But it does come at a price. This truck comes in at almost $100,000. So the overland vehicles are starting to push 6 figures.